burying her face in her hands. "Daddy?" she muttered to herself, mocking her own tone. "I have never heard you call your dad Daddy before in your entire adult life, Darlene. What is wrong with you?" The door clicked open, and Ben walked back in, holding his car keys. "Oh," Darlene said, jumping slightly in her seat. "You are back quickly." Just forgot my wallet on the back desk," Ben explained, walking past her to retrieve it. "I cannot buy your agave coffee without money." "Oh, you know what, Ben?" Darlene said quickly, waving her hands. I do not actually need another cup of coffee right now. I am already vibrating from the 3 cups I had this morning. Save your money." Ben stopped and looked at her closely, his expression turning serious. "All right, I gotta be honest with you, Darlene. I am really worried about you right now. You look completely exhausted." "Yeah, it is that stupid expressway traffic," Darlene lied, looking away from his searching gaze. "That is the main problem. The traffic is draining my soul." "Oh, we both know what the actual solution to that problem is," Ben said, stepping closer and taking her hands in his. "You need to move in with me permanently. You know those big real estate signs that say if you lived here, you would be home and having sex with Ben by now? Well, if you moved in, you would be home and having sex with Ben by now. It is a proven fact." Darlene offered a weak, strained smile. "I love you, you know that, Ben, but I just really cannot think about making huge life decisions like this right now with everything going on with Becky." "Okay," Ben said gently, kissing her forehead. "Tabled for another time. I understand. But at least let me just drive you back to the hospital right now, so I can keep you company in the waiting room." No, you know what? That is so incredibly sweet of you, Ben," Darlene said, her voice rising slightly in panic as she thought of David waiting for her. "But it is just far too many people at the hospital right now. When you are expecting a premature baby, they give you a much smaller room. There is barely enough oxygen for the family as it is. Go back to work, I will handle it." Back at the Conner house, the kitchen was quiet for the first time all day. Leo was still working on his laptop, his brow furrowed as he typed out a line of code, while Kira sat on the counter, swinging her legs and sharing a sandwich with Gizmo, who took small, polite bites from her hand. The back door opened, and Darlene walked in, her movements frantic as she began tossing random items into a canvas tote bag. "How is Aunt Becky doing?" Kira asked, hopping down from the counter and wiping her hands on her adventurer jacket. "Is the baby coming?" "Oh, pretty much the exact same as before," Darlene said, not looking up as she grabbed a clean receiving blanket from the laundry basket. "I'm just going to grab some clean clothes and personal stuff for her and run right back to the hospital before she notices I left." "Okay," Kira said, pointing to a plastic bowl on the table. "Do you want me to save you some of this fresh kale salad I made for dinner?" Darlene stopped and looked at the green leaves with profound disgust. "Listen to me carefully, Kira. Let me tell you the absolute truth about kale. In the old days, when you would go to a decent cafeteria, kale was just that decorative green stuff that they used to keep the ice from touching the bowls of cottage cheese on the buffet line. It is all corporate hype. You do not just go from being a functional garnish to a certified superfood overnight. I feel so incredibly stupid that I actually fell for it for a brief period in college." "It is a lie." A loud, aggressive knocking at the front door interrupted her lecture. Someone was pounding on the wood as if they were trying to break it down. Coming, I am coming," Dan's voice boomed from the hallway as he walked out of his bedroom, having returned home briefly to change his shirt. He opened the front door to find a woman standing on the porch. She was wearing a faded denim jacket, had a massive, half-faded tattoo of a man's face on her forearm, and looked completely furious. "Hi, how can I help you?" Dan asked, his voice guarded. "I am looking for Harris Healy's mother," the woman said, crossing her arms and tapping her foot aggressively against the porch steps. "Is she around?" "She is not home from work yet," Dan said, leaning against the doorframe to block her view of the interior. "But I am Harris's grandfather. What exactly can I do for you on this afternoon?" "Your lovely granddaughter goes to the high school with my son, Kyle," the woman stated, her eyes narrowing. "And yesterday afternoon, she sold him a homemade pot cookie during third period." Dan blinked, his face remaining entirely expressionless for 3 long seconds. "Okay," he said slowly. "I can honestly kind of believe that she sold him pot, because she is a teenager in this town, but I do not believe for one single second that she actually baked anything. The girl does not know how to turn on the oven." "Well, you better believe it," The woman snapped, shaking her head. Kyle completely freaked out in the middle of the living room, and I was up all night long trying to reassure him that time wasn't standing still and that his heart wasn't going to explode. It was a nightmare. Yeah, stuff does get on top of you like that sometimes, Dan said, a small, involuntary smirk touching his lips before he quickly wiped it away. Listen, I am really sorry about that. We would never want that kind of experience to happen to any kid in this neighborhood. You tell her mother that I had to take him straight to urgent care because he was hyperventilating, the woman demanded. I am out exactly $200 for the copay, and I need that money right now to pay for my upcoming tattoo removal appointment. Dan looked at her arm. Tattoo removal? Yes, she said, gesturing to the faded face on her forearm. So my brand new husband cannot handle looking at my ex-husband's face while he is behind me on the motorcycle. It is causing marital strife. Your first husband liked looking at his own face while he was back there? Dan asked, genuinely curious. It was a major red flag that I completely ignored at the time, okay? The woman snapped, waving her hand dismissively. Look, are you going to give me the money or what? I am really sorry, lady, but I cannot help you with the $200 right now, Dan said, shaking his head. I simply do not have it on me. Times are tight. All right. Well, maybe I'll just walk into your living room and take something that looks like it is worth $200, she threatened, looking past his shoulder. No? Fine. I will come back when the mother is home from work. She turned to leave just as Darlene walked out the front door, carrying her tote bag. Hey, the woman shouted, pointing a finger at her. Are you Conner-Healy's mother? Because if you are, you owe me a significant amount of money for medical bills. Nope, Darlene said without stopping, pushing past her down the steps. Never seen you before in my life. Well, tell her I will be back tomorrow, the woman yelled after her. I will absolutely pass that message along, Darlene called back over her shoulder. You have a truly blessed day. Dan watched the woman storm down the driveway, then turned to Darlene with a look of thunderous anger. What the hell was that all about, Darlene? You heard her, Dan, Darlene said, her voice dropping as she realized Leo and Kiro were listening from the kitchen. You got a massive problem on your hands. Your granddaughter is apparently selling pot cookies at the local high school. What? Dan groaned, slamming his hand against the porch railing. How come when I get home from a long day of construction work, it is never because somebody in this family got a college scholarship? Why is it always a drug deal? Where is Harris right now? She is still at the hospital with the rest of the family, Darlene said, checking her watch. Damn, Dan muttered, grabbing his coat. What is wrong now? Did something else happen? They could not stop the labor with the medication, Darlene said softly, her tough exterior cracking for a moment. The baby is coming right now, Dan. We have to go. All right, we got to get going immediately, Dan said, rushing toward his truck. We need to get there before Bev wraps the poor thing in a restaurant napkin and puts it in her purse for real. In the delivery room, the monitors were beeping at a frantic, terrifying pace. Becky was drenched in sweat, her fingers gripping the metal rails of the hospital bed so tightly her knuckles were white. Jackie stood on one side, holding a damp washcloth to her forehead, while Roseanne stood on the other, shouting encouragement. Okay, Becky, just one more massive push, the doctor ordered, positioning himself at the end of the bed. You are almost there. I cannot do it anymore, Roseanne, Becky sobbed, shaking her head. I have nothing left. I am too tired. You absolutely can do this, Roseanne shouted, her voice filling the room with authority. It is a preemie, Becky. It is very small. It is going to slide right out. One more push. Becky let out a primal scream, straining with every ounce of strength she possessed. Oh, my God, she's here, Jackie whispered, tears springing to her eyes as a tiny infant emerged into the doctor's hands. Nurse, call for the team, the doctor said quickly, his tone shifting from encouraging to intensely professional. Is she okay? Becky gasped, trying to sit up. Why isn't she crying, Roseanne? Why is it so quiet in here? You did great, Becky, Roseanne said, her voice unusually gentle as she pushed her daughter back onto the pillows. Just rest for a single second and let them work. Why aren't they putting her directly on my chest? Becky demanded, her voice rising in panic as she watched 3 nurses swarm around a small warming table. Jackie, you said the birth plan required immediate chest contact for the oxytocin surge. Why aren't they doing it? This is exactly what is supposed to happen with a premature birth. Dear, Jackie lied smoothly, though her own hands were shaking as she adjusted the washcloth. They need to stabilize her first. They are going to take her straight to the neonatal intensive care unit, the doctor explained, his back to them as he adjusted a tiny oxygen mask. I want to see her right now, Becky cried, trying to swing her legs out of the bed. Let me see my baby. Just let them do their jobs, Becky, Roseanne commanded, holding her down with a firm but loving grip. It is going to be okay. I promise you. Does she look normal, Roseanne? Becky asked, tears streaming down her face. Tell me the truth. Does she have all her fingers and toes? Yes, she looks absolutely perfect, Roseanne said, looking over at the tiny infant. Then why on earth cannot I see her? Becky whispered, her voice breaking. Because she is very small, Roseanne said, trying to inject some trademark Conner humor into the terrifying moment. She is so tiny she cannot even be seen by the naked eye, Becky. We are going to need a microscope just to find her nose. This is all my fault, Becky groaned, pulling the hospital blanket over her face. I am too old to be having children. I drank far too much alcohol in my 20s. That is the real reason why she was born too early. I ruined her. No, come on, Roseanne said, pulling the blanket back down and forcing Becky to look at her. Don't you dare do that to yourself, Becky. You know what? I did absolutely everything perfectly right when I was pregnant with Harris. I followed every single medical rule in the book, and she still turned out to be a preemie, and she turned out completely fine. Darlene, who had just walked into the room with Dan, let out a loud snort. No, she didn't, Roseanne. She is currently running an illegal bakery out of her locker. An hour later, the family had gathered in the main hallway outside the neonatal intensive care unit. The atmosphere was a mix of intense relief and lingering anxiety. Beverly sat on a bench near the water fountain, looking around the clean, modern corridor with a critical eye. This county emergency room always reminds me of that famous scene in Gone with the Wind, Beverly remarked, adjusting her pearls. You know, the one with all the thousands of Confederate soldiers laying on the muddy ground, slowly dying in the sun. It has that exact same cheerful ambience. Frankly, Mom, I didn't care for the extensive cursing at the very end of that movie, Roseanne said, walking over with 2 paper cups of terrible hospital coffee. Frankly, my dear, I do not give a damn was highly unnecessary for the plot. Okay, the baby is officially here. Are Becky and the baby completely okay? Dan asked, his face etched with worry as he met Roseanne in the center of the hallway. Becky is fine. She is just exhausted, Roseanne reassured him, taking a sip of the hot liquid. The baby wasn't breathing entirely on her own at first, which gave us a bit of a scare, but they put her on a ventilator immediately, and the doctor says she is now completely stable. Thank God for modern medicine. Can we go back there and see them now? Darlene asked, stepping forward with her canvas tote bag. Becky is still pretty upset and emotional, Roseanne said, shaking her head. But she has got Jackie in there with her right now, so it is only a matter of time before it gets significantly worse in there. Harris, you are not going anywhere. Harris, who had been slowly edging toward the elevators with her phone in her hand, froze. What? You are selling pot cookies at the high school? Roseanne demanded, her voice echoing down the quiet hallway. Are you completely stupid, Harris? What were you thinking? Are we really going to do this family intervention right here in public? Harris asked, looking around uncomfortably as a doctor walked past. Yes, we absolutely are, Roseanne said, stepping into her space. Kyle's mom came by the house today, Harris. She was completely furious. She had to take her kid to the urgent care clinic because he thought his soul was leaving his body. I explicitly told him to only eat half a cookie, Harris muttered, looking down at her shoes. It isn't my fault he cannot handle his stuff. This is not about Kyle's complete inability to maintain his composure, Harris, Darlene chimed in, her voice cold. This is about you selling illegal drugs on school property. You could get expelled. You could go to juvenile hall. Oh my God, Mom, Harris said, throwing her hands up. The state is going to legalize recreational marijuana soon anyway. They're going to be selling pot to absolutely everybody in this hospital in 3 months. Nobody actually cares anymore. And it is not like I am eating the cookies myself. What? Roseanne said, her jaw dropping. Hey, you cannot eat it. You absolutely cannot sell it. And furthermore, you are completely underage. And by the way, where on earth are you getting weed from in this town? It is everywhere, Grandma, Harris said, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a child. Everybody is selling it. Honestly, it is kind of amazing that I am doing so well in school considering the environment. My actual hustle is putting the weed in gourmet cookies and adding a dash of cardamom. It makes it exotic and a little bit unexpected. The hipsters love it. You're actually bragging about your business model right now? Darlene asked, staring at her daughter in absolute disbelief. Do you realize that if Kyle's mom had called the local police instead of coming to our house, you would be sitting in a jail cell right now? You know what? You are going to give me every single dollar you made from this operation. I am taking your phone away for the next month, and you are not leaving the house for the rest of the semester. Oh, wow. I am grounded, Harris mocked, rolling her eyes. Like you are even going to know if I am home or not, Mom. You are never around anyway. You live at your office. Darlene flinched slightly, but quickly recovered her sarcastic armor. You really think it hurts my feelings when you point out that I am not a good mother, Harris? Like water off a duck's back, baby. I have been insulted by professionals. By 10 o'clock that evening, the house was dark save for the single lamp burning in the kitchen. Dan sat at the table, a fork in his hand, staring at a half-eaten apple pie that sat in the center of the table. Beverly was sitting across from him, sipping a cup of herbal tea. The back door opened, and Roseanne walked in, her shoulders sagging as she dropped her keys onto the counter. Bev, Dan said, looking up from his plate. Yes, Dan, Beverly replied smoothly. It has been an incredibly long and exhausting day, Roseanne said, walking over to the table. So please do not take this the wrong way, Mom. But why on earth are you still sitting in my kitchen? Don't you have a home of your own to inhabit? Everybody has got to be somewhere, Roseanne, Beverly said with a cynical smile. I prefer to be where the drama unfolds. I have had a completely crappy day, Roseanne sighed, rubbing her eyes. Becky was absolutely terrified to see the baby at first, but now she finally wants to see her, so I have to grab some medical forms and run right back to the hospital in 20 minutes. Is that pie? There is pie, Dan said, gesturing to the table. I got enough for everybody. God bless you, Dan, Roseanne said, cutting herself a massive slice. I was honestly wondering where you were all evening. I am only asking because it has been just me and Beverly sitting here alone for hours, Dan said, his voice dripping with mock misery. Hours, Roseanne. Do you have any idea what I have endured? Did you know, Roseanne, Beverly interrupted, leaning forward with a pleasant smile, that when Jackie was born back in the day, she caused my bladder to drop directly into my vagina? It was a medical marvel. Dan dropped his fork onto the plate with a loud clatter. You had to see that mental image right now, didn't you, Roseanne? Right while you were trying to enjoy a nice baked good? Well, I am absolutely not going to let you ruin this apple pie for me, Mom, Roseanne said, taking a massive bite anyway. No offense, Dan, but I do not particularly like to watch you eat when you are in a bad mood either. The door opened again, and Darlene walked into the kitchen, looking exhausted. Oh, you enjoying that pie, Dad? She asked, sniffing the air. Smells great, huh? Yep, Dan said, his tone turning suddenly sharp. I love the smell of fresh apple pie. So you can smell apple pie from the hallway, Darlene, but you somehow cannot smell the overwhelming scent of pot cookies baking in your own oven for the past 2 weeks? Darlene froze, her hand on the refrigerator door. What? How did you not know what Harris was doing in this house? Dan demanded, slamming his hand on the table. She was using our brown sugar, Darlene. Whoa, 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 Darlene said, turning around with her defense mechanisms raised high. You're going to blame your granddaughter selling drugs on my parenting skills? Yes, I am, Dan shot back, standing up from his chair. Because you are supposed to be here raising them, and I am here, and you are not. Whose fault is that, Dad? Darlene yelled back, her anger finally bubbling over. I am working full-time to support this family. Oh, are you? Dan asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. Because you are getting home at 10 o'clock every single night, Darlene. I do not know if you are spending all that extra time with Ben or what exactly you are doing, but you are definitely not coming straight home from work every night. Oh, so I am not allowed to have a personal life anymore, Darlene shouted, her face turning red. Because I distinctly remember when I was a kid, you would go straight from the construction site to the local lounge. You would have a cold beer for 2 hours. Then you would walk through that door and say, "There are my girls." The baby would start crying for some reason. And you would immediately hide in the garage to fix a lawnmower bike. Hey, Dan roared, his voice shaking the cabinets. I worked my absolute ass off day and night to support this family during the recession, and I was always there when it truly counted. Hey, you need to get your head in the game right now and raise your kids before they end up in a state penitentiary. I already raised mine. Oh, did you though, Dad? Darlene scoffed, crossing her arms tightly. Because if we are going to be completely honest about our childhood, I am pretty sure it was Mom who raised us while you were out in the garage. No, Roseanne interrupted, swallowing her last bite of pie and looking at both of them with a deadpan expression. If we are going to be completely honest with ourselves, the television did 70% of the heavy lifting. The neonatal intensive care unit was quiet, filled only with the rhythmic humming of machines and the soft, ambient glow of the monitors. Becky sat in a comfortable rocking chair next to an incubator, her eyes fixed on the tiny baby inside. Jackie stood beside her, a gentle hand on her shoulder. The door clicked open, and Roseanne walked in quietly, followed by the rest of the family who were holding small gifts. How is she doing? Roseanne whispered, walking over to the incubator. Hi, Becky said softly, a tired smile on her face. Every now and then, when she is trying to move her little arms around, she accidentally punches herself right in the side of the head. She's definitely a Conner. Oh, wonderful, another emotional Conner in the world, Roseanne joked, looking through the clear plastic at her new granddaughter. What we completely lack in quality as a family, we definitely make up for in sheer volume. Darn right we do, Dan said, walking into the room behind them, his anger from the kitchen completely gone, replaced by the soft expression of a grandfather. Grammy Becky's here to see her baby. Are you ready to hold her for a minute? I think so, Becky said, her voice trembling as a nurse carefully lifted the tiny infant, who was attached to several small wires, and placed her gently into Becky's arms. Oh my God, Roseanne. She is so incredibly tiny. Look at all these tubes. I know. It looks scary, Becky, Roseanne said, kneeling next to the chair. But all those high-tech things in there are helping her get stronger every single minute. Look, she is looking right at you. Yeah, of course she is, Jackie said, wiping a tear from her cheek. You are her mom, Becky. I am her mom, Becky repeated, a tear falling onto the baby's blanket. Have you officially decided on a name yet? Jackie asked, leaning in closer with a hopeful look in her eye. You know, the traditional name Jacqueline means may God protect. We could easily call her Jackie Jr. That would be so incredibly cute, right? Think about the matching outfits. Her name is Beverly Rose, Becky announced firmly, looking up at her family. I wanted a strong, permanent connection with the family history. Jackie's face instantly dropped, her jaw hanging open in absolute shock. Becky, she said, her voice shaking with deep theatrical betrayal, I want you to know that I will always love this baby with all my heart. But I consider it a direct personal attack and a complete negation of my entire childhood of emotional pain that you have named this precious angel after the vessel of pure evil that is my mother. Nuff said, Roseanne interrupted, grabbing Jackie's arm. Come on, everyone. Let us let these two get to know each other better without the family therapy session. Do you need anything before we leave, Becky? No, we are perfectly fine here. Thanks, Roseanne, Becky said, her eyes never leaving the baby's face. As they walked out into the hallway, Roseanne turned to Jackie. I'm so sorry, Jackie. See, it is even better when you wait for the disappointment. It builds character. I'm going to go down to the cafeteria and get the pizza we ordered. An hour later, Darlene walked into her own bedroom, completely exhausted. She threw her purse onto the chair and turned on the small bedside lamp, only to gasp loudly. Sitting up in her bed, looking completely comfortable underneath her blankets, was David. Oh, Darlene screamed, slapping her hand over her mouth. What? Was that completely naked man in your bed, David? Jackie's voice shrieked from the doorway, having followed her down the hall to complain about the baby's name. Shoo, Darlene hissed, spinning around and slamming the bedroom door shut in Jackie's face before opening it just enough to slip out into the hallway. Yes, it is David. What on earth are you doing here in my house, Jackie? I needed a night away from Mom, Jackie whispered fiercely. She is driving me insane. But well, this is absolutely great news, Darlene. You finally made a definitive decision. You broke up with Ben. Darlene rubbed her face, looking incredibly guilty. Well, that sure would have made things a whole lot simpler, Jackie. Wait a single minute, Jackie said, her eyes widening in horror as the realization hit her. You're sleeping with both of them? At the exact same time? I thought you explicitly told me you weren't that kind of person. Well, apparently I am that person now, Darlene groaned, leaning her head against the wall. I set a firm moral boundary for myself, and then I crossed it immediately. I am so incredibly stupid. Why did I do that? You gotta help me figure a way out of this, Jackie. Well, Jackie stammered, thinking quickly. If somebody took Ben off your hands permanently, would that? Stay away from him, Jackie, Darlene warned, glaring at her aunt. Okay, fine, Jackie said, turning around. Good night, Darlene. Good night, Darlene muttered, walking back into her room. Downstairs in the living room, Dan and Roseanne were sitting on the couch, sharing a final slice of pie. Gizmo the dog was curled up at their feet, snoring softly, while Leo and Kira were quietly playing a board game at the coffee table nearby. A brand new Connor in the world, Dan said, staring into the fireplace. Let us please promise to learn from the massive mistakes of our past this time around. Oh, I agree completely, Roseanne said, leaning her head on his shoulder. You know what? Let us raise her to expect absolutely nothing from life, so she is never disappointed when things go wrong. Or, Kira suggested, looking up from the board game with a bright smile, we can tell her she can be absolutely whatever she wants to be when she grows up. Roseanne snorted, shaking her head. That is a mean, cruel joke to play on a baby in this economy. Kira, what if we never tell her she's a Connor? What if we raise her like Moses or Tarzan? Oh, yeah, exactly like Tarzan, Dan laughed, putting his arm around Roseanne. But instead of holding onto a jungle vine for survival, she can hold on to a steady job with health benefits. Quick, let us go back to the hospital and tell Becky before she fills out the official birth certificate, Roseanne said, standing up. This survival advice is for when you come home, kid. You know Tarzan, you Connor. The family laughed together, the sound echoing through the old house, a warm barrier against the cold night. No matter how chaotic life became, they were Connors, and they would always find a way to survive.